Welcome to episode 51 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the Seven Against Thebes, with the story of brothers in single combat. This was the end of the attack on the city of Thebes. But when Creon and Eteocles were back in the shelter of their own ramparts, the beaten Argive host gathered again and was soon ready to attack once more. The Thebans, quickly aware of this, had small hope of resisting a second time, since their numbers had been thinned and their strength weakened by the first attack. And then King Eteocles came to a bold resolve. He sent his herald to the Argives, who had again approached and were camped near the city moat. He had him call for silence, and then he himself, standing on the highest tower of his palace, cried to his own men within and to the Argives without the walls. "Deny, and Argives," he said in ringing tones, "all of you who have come to beset this city, and you, the people of Thebes, do not sacrifice so many lives for me and Polynices. Rather let me bear the brunt of this feud, and fight with my brother in single combat. If I slay him, let me rule the land. But should I fall by his hand, the scepter shall be his, and my foes shall lower their weapons and return home without wasting more blood." Then from the ranks of the Argives sprang Polynices, declaring his willingness to accept these conditions. Both sides were already more than tired of a war, which could prevent only one of two, and so the opposing hosts applauded Eteocles' proposal. An agreement was drawn up, and both leaders confirmed it with solemn oath. And now the sons of Oedipus armed themselves from head to foot. The noblest of the Thebans accoutred their king, and the most powerful among the Argives fitted out Polynices, the exile from his realm. They confronted each other sheathed in bronze, and brother measured brother with strong and steadfast gaze. "Remember," the friends of Polynices called to him, "remember that Zeus expects you to rear him a monument in Argos in gratitude for the victory he is about to grant you." And the Thebans urged on Prince Eteocles. "You are fighting for your city and your throne," they said. "Let the thought of this double prize spur you on to win." Before the combat began, the soothsayers from both sides came together and made sacrifice to discover from the shape of the flames what the outcome would be. But the signs were uncertain. They could be read as victory or defeat for the one side or the other. When the offerings had been made and the brothers stood ready, Polynices lifted his hands in supplication, turned his head toward the land of the Argives, and prayed, "Hera, sovereign over Argos, from your country I choose my wife. In your country I live. Let me, your citizen, win, and dye my right hand in the blood of my foe." Eteocles, the while, looked toward Athene's temple in Thebes. "O daughter of Zeus," he pleaded, "guide my lance straight to its mark, to the breast of him who came to destroy my fatherland." As the last words left his lips, a fanfare of trumpets proclaimed the beginning of the combat, and the two brothers ran forward and hurled themselves upon each other like savage boars. We have whetted their tusks for the fight. Their lance crossed in mid-air and rebounded from the shields. And now they aimed their spears at each other's faces and eyes, but again the shields caught the thrust. As for the spectators, the sweat broke out over their bodies in great drops at the sight of so grim a struggle. And now Eteocles put out his right foot to push aside a stone lying in his way, and incautiously allowed his left to protrude from under his shield. At once, Polynices pierced his shin, while the entire Argive host shouted with joy, as if one wound had decided the victory. But even when Eteocles felt the point enter his flesh, he did not allow his senses to blur with pain, and keeping a sharp lookout, saw his opponent's shoulder exposed. He launched his spear, and it struck, but not deeply, so that only the point broke off, and the Thebans exclaimed only a little in half-hearted joy. Eteocles recoiled, picked up a fragment of marble, and casting it, split his brother's lance in half. And now they were even, again, since each had lost one of his weapons. They took a firm grip on their swords and fought breast to breast. Shields rang on shield, and the air quivered with the clash of battle. Then Eteocles remembered a trick he had learned in Thessaly. He suddenly shifted his position, drew backward, throwing his weight on his left foot, covered the lower part of his body with a great care, and then leaped forward with his right foot and pierced his brother, who was unprepared for so sudden a change in position. Through the stomach, just above the hips, Polynices leaned to one side and then sank to the ground in a pool of blood. Eteocles, sure of victory, cast aside his sword and bent over his dying brother to take his arms from him. But this was his undoing, for in his fall Polynices had not loosed his grasp on his sword, and now, though his breath came in feeble gasps, he still had strength enough to thrust the blade into the very liver of Eteocles, bending above him. Dying, he fell beside his dying brother. And now the gates of Thebes were flung wide, and the women and slaves poured out to lament their dead ruler. But Antigone leaned over her brother Polynices, whom she loved, to catch at last his very last words from his lips. Eteocles had died almost immediately. A single long rattling sigh, and he was no more. But Polynices still breathed. He turned his dimming eyes towards his sister and said, "How I mourn your lot, my sister, and that of my dead brother, who was once my friend and become my foe. Only now that I am dying do I know how much I loved him. As for you, I beg you to bury me in the earth of my native land. Do not let the city of Thebes deny me this. And now close my eyes with your hand, for already the shadow of death lies cold upon my forehead." He died in his sister's arms, and at once both sides began to wrangle aloud in bitter disagreement. The Thebans credited Eteocles, their lord, with the victory, while the Argives claimed it for Polynices. The friends of the fallen were also at cross purposes. "Polynices was the first to strike with the lance," cried some. "But he was also the first to fall," counted others. So heated grew the quarrel that they took to arms. Fortunately for the Thebans, they were ranged for battle, since they had fought forth fully armed both during and after the combat between the brothers, while the Argives had laid aside their weapons, too certain of victory to observe caution. And so, when the Thebans suddenly threw themselves upon their foes, giving them no time to gird on their armor, they met with no resistance. The unarmed Argives scattered over the plain in disorderly flight, and Theban lances slew them by the hundreds. This was the occasion when Periclymenus of Thebes pursued Amphiaraus, the soothsayer, to the shore of the river Ismenus. Amphiaraus was fleeing in a chariot, and the horses balked at the swirling waters. When the Theban at his heels, however, he had no choice but bid his charioteer ford the stream. Before the horses even wetted their hooves, however, his enemy had reached the bank, and his spear almost touched the neck of the seer. But Zeus did not wish one whom he had lent the gift of prophecy to perish ingloriously. He cracked open the earth with a thunderbolt and yawned looked like a black cave and swallowed up both chariot and soothsayer. Soon the enemies of Thebes were swept from the surrounding countryside. From all sides swarmed the Thebans, bringing the shields of the foes they had slain and spoils from the fugitives they had overtaken. Laden with plunder, they made a triumphant entry into their city. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.